Yes, you can see the screen.
Okay. Okay, so today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the research that I'm doing at the Music Technology Group at the Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona. So a lot of the work that I've done in the past couple of years, I come kind of from a mix of music technology background, and I'm very much into the maker world. So I'm always interested in building installations or instruments or things like that. And I've been working with VR for the past couple of years, also developing XR performances. But for my research, I decided to work with music and virtual reality. It's not really been touched upon within research, so I wanted to add to that. So the research that I'm doing is actually bioaffective musical virtual reality for the reduction of stress and anxiety. And I'm going to explain a little bit about that and what it means. So what I'm doing this for is essentially I wanted to combine music with virtual reality to see if I could effectively reduce anxiety and stress in people who are using it. And for that, I'm using biosignal affected music, and I'm also recording biosignals in real time, and I'll explain a little bit about that. And I'm also looking at the role of music and how that can aid to reduce stress and anxiety within a virtual environment. So a couple of things that I'm looking at is which type of environment is going to be best in aiding to diminish anxiety levels. You see that meditation applications have been popular. Maybe if you use VR or use Quest, they have some popular meditation applications to use. Whether or not there's differences in the relaxation depending on the genre of music. There's been plenty of studies talking about classical music. There have been studies discussing whether or not there's any difference in what genre of music you listen to. And for this, I also composed a soundtrack that's sort of Indian Persian in genre, but it's also meant to sort of entrain the heart rate. So I'm also looking at whether or not that has any effect in lowering the biological signals during these tests. And that's also what I'm using for the effective part of my experiences. So explain a little bit about that. So just a quick overview of talking about things like stress and anxiety. Most of the time, the two things that we have to treat those are medications, things like antidepressants and more pills, and cognitive behavioral therapy, talk therapy. Some of the new things that have been coming out, whether it's research, some experimental treatments have been virtual reality exposure treatment. People use this with war veterans in order to expose them to situations that they've been in combat. And that's been shown to have been helpful to those veterans. And the use of commercial and serious video games, using those to help treat whether it's PTSD or any types of phobias, social phobias. And of course, music therapy is an entire field. There have been so many studies talking about how music therapy can help with difficult situations, behavioral problems, with pre-surgery anxiety. So using VR for a therapeutic purpose, obviously this is kind of a new field, so there's not too much research on it. But so far, it's been looked at to use for post-traumatic stress disorder, like I just mentioned. Generalized anxiety, which is I'm looking into generalized anxiety and stress. social anxiety, fear of heights, autism, as well as things like phobias, like people who are afraid of flying, people who are afraid of spiders. And as I just mentioned, there are several meditation applications like this one, Remind VR, as well as Sound Self, which is an interesting audio-reactive one that I like. The idea is to have the immersive meditation, and they all have the same kind of ideas. They are in a peaceful environment. A lot of times they don't focus too much on the sounds. They don't focus too much on the music. However, some of these that have been used in studies have shown positive results to reduce some of the symptoms of anxiety and stress in the people who have used it. Another thing to mention is flow. I decided to use a virtual reality environment because you are completely immersed in that environment. Besides having your visual environment encased in this environment, you also have spatial audio. And of course, graphics have shown to really help in your immersion level. So for those of you who haven't worked with biosensors before, I've used them a lot in interaction during musical performances, used them during music tech hack events, things like that. I'm using the Bereichten device, which is a small Arduino-like device here. And I'm measuring the heart rate, and I'm also measuring the sweat level of participants. So to mention something about flow, so flow actually comes in a lot when we're talking specifically with musicians, because musicians reach flow state during their practice and also during their performance. And when we talk about flow state, what does that mean? During a flow state, if you've ever been really, really engrossed in an activity, you lose a sense of time, of place. You kind of lose track of what you're doing, and you're just really engrossed in what you're doing. If you've ever just been playing drums for a while or guitar and you just forget about what you're doing, then you've entered into a state of flow. So this concept has been very important in my research because I've been basically studying the flow and the presence level of the participants during the experiments that I've been doing. I'm going to mention the word effective. So when I say I'm working with effective music, what does that mean? That means that it's emotionally driven. In this case, it's driven by the biosignals. So I am actually changing the sounds and the music in the environment depending on the heart rate and the sweat level of the participants. And when you say emotionally driven, this can be actually emotionally driven as the heart rate and the amount of sweat level in a person have been marked as biomarkers as the level of anxiety that a person is experiencing. So that's why I'm using those particular biosignals. The other thing that I'm looking at is musical genres and whether or not those have any effect. We know that music has all sorts of benefits for brain health, for mental health. Classical music is always the genre that is touted to be the best for study and relaxation and focus. And there have been some studies that say maybe that's not completely true. Maybe it's preference-based. So I also ask my participants if they have any particular preference in genres before they do the studies. And whether or not there's a big difference in music versus no music. I could only find so far one study that's been done focusing on this topic. And I don't know, not surprisingly to me, it's that the virtual reality environment that uses music had a much better effect in lowering the panic level in the people that were using the virtual reality. So I've already talked about what my objectives are and what I'm doing. Obviously, my hope for my experiments is to see that this can actually diminish the symptoms for the user, definitely while they are participating in the experience, and to see whether or not this would be beneficial if they used it over and over again. So what I'm actually doing in when I'm talking about my biogenerative music, I have the user who is inside of the environment, and they then wear a device that reports to Max MSP. And then Max MSP takes that, and I have each level divided, determined on the data that comes in for their heart rate and their sweat level. And those are split up, and I have them in relaxed, somewhat stressed, and panicked levels. So if the person is in the experience and they are a little panicked, that will report back some minor chords, some diminished chords, augmented, some things that are out of key. So things that give you a cue that something's wrong. I also play with environmental sounds. So if you're feeling relaxed, you'll hear birds, and that'll give you a note that you're feeling more relaxed. So I broke this up into 3 different experiments. I'm in the final phase right now. So the first one was just testing environments. I made 4 different environments based on the seasons. I based it off of the French Pyrenees because to me that was pretty relaxing. So I tested each one of those environments, and I just used environmental sounds for each one, depending on the season that it was. So you would hear what you would expect to hear. And the one that went forward would be the most relaxing based on the poll from each one of the participants. And that one ended up being the spring environment, which I have here. The second one was testing that classical music. So the music that everyone thinks of as relaxing. This is the one that's going to get you into focus, into your flow state. And for this one, I used 2 pieces of Debussy. And for that, I picked Arabesque No. 1 and Clair de Lune, and I picked those basically because I needed to have a same amount of time. So all 3 experiments, I have the participants in virtual reality at the same amount of time. So I needed to do a lot of research, listening to a lot of different tracks, looking at some lists to see which ones were considered the most relaxing. Debussy came up number 1 a lot of the times. So, and these are both just pure piano pieces. So that's the one that I decided to go with on the second experiment. And the third one, which I'm actually in the middle of now, is using those effective music. So as I said, I have them in the virtual reality environment, looking at that relaxing Pyrenees visual environment, and I have them wearing 2 different devices, one that's recording my data in real time and one that's acting as the effective device. So I have a snapshot of part of my Max patch here that then reads their information It splits it up into the different levels, whether it's relaxed, stressed out, or panicked, and then reports back given a bank of sounds that I have, and gives that to the user. So obviously, I said I'm still in progress. So I haven't crunched all of the numbers from the biosignals yet, because I have a lot of participants and it's a lot of numbers. So far in self-reporting, a lot of the self-reporting has been positive. People feel relaxed. People especially feel that they enter the flow state and they have a high presence level. They lose sense of time. Especially, I noticed in the second experiment when I started introducing the music tracks. And then just quick glance at the data of the participants after they have finished. I have noticed that there is a trend, and the biosignals from when I take their initial baseline reading when they come into the experiment to the very end of the experiment after they've finished everything. But of course, I need to confirm that by going over lots and lots of numbers, and that's what I'm going to start doing in May when I finish these experiments. So yeah, that's just a quick overview of what I've been working on in my research. And yeah, if there's any questions.